The day he found me digging through that dumpster changed both our lives forever, but not for the reasons you might think. I never thought I'd be grateful for hitting rock bottom. There I was, a 19-year-old girl with nothing but the clothes on my back, searching through restaurant garbage for anything edible. That's when he pulled up in his luxury car, watching me from behind tinted windows. I had no idea this stranger in an expensive suit would recognize something in me that even I had forgotten existed. The truth would leave us both in tears, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll never forget that cold October evening. The wind cut through my thin jacket as I rummaged through the dumpster behind Luigi's restaurant. I wasn't always like this. 6 months ago, I had a home, a job at the local bookstore, and dreams of college. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. First came Mom's cancer diagnosis, then the mounting medical bills, and finally, the eviction notice. I promised her I'd be okay after she passed, but here I was, stomach growling, hands trembling from both cold and shame. That's when the sleek black Mercedes pulled into the alley, its headlights momentarily blinding me. I froze, clutching a half-eaten sandwich to my chest like it was treasure. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that didn't match his expensive suit. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend I wasn't desperate, but my stomach betrayed me with a loud growl. Despite everything, I found myself smiling awkwardly, embarrassed by my body's honest response. What happened next would have seemed unbelievable if I hadn't lived it myself. He didn't just offer me a meal, though he did that too. He stepped out of his car, introduced himself as Robert, and walked me to the front entrance of Luigi's. I was mortified, certain everyone would stare at my dirty clothes and unwashed hair. "I own the place," he explained, noticing my hesitation. The staff greeted him with respect but looked at me with curiosity. He led me to a private room in the back, ordered practically everything on the menu, and then simply watched as I ate, a strange expression crossing his face every time I smiled between bites of the best food I'd tasted in months. What struck me most wasn't his generosity but how he seemed more interested in talking than in making himself feel good about helping someone. He asked about my life, listening intently as I hesitantly shared my story. When I mentioned my mother's name, Elizabeth, his hand froze mid-air, his water glass never reaching his lips. "Elizabeth who?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. I told him her maiden name, watching confusion, then shock, then something like wonder cross his face. He quickly composed himself, but I could tell something had changed. He insisted on driving me to a hotel for the night, promising we'd talk more tomorrow. I was suspicious but desperate, clutching his business card like a lifeline as he drove away. Little did I know, he was already making phone calls that would uncover a truth neither of us was prepared for. Robert couldn't sleep that night. My mother's name had triggered memories from 30 years ago, a summer romance with a woman named Elizabeth who disappeared without a trace. The timing, the resemblance in my smile, it was too coincidental. He called his private investigator at midnight, apologizing for the hour but insisting it couldn't wait. "Find everything you can about Elizabeth Winters and her daughter," he demanded, pacing his penthouse floor. He'd built his restaurant empire from nothing, acquired wealth beyond his wildest dreams, but had always felt something was missing. Now, staring at the city lights below, he wondered if he'd finally found what he never knew he'd lost. By morning, the preliminary report arrived. My mother had indeed been the same Elizabeth from his past. She'd left town suddenly, never telling him she was pregnant. The investigator found old photos, documents, a paper trail leading right to me. Robert sat in his car outside the hotel for nearly an hour, the file heavy in his hands, trying to process what this meant. He'd had a daughter all these years and never known. And now, that daughter was alone, homeless, struggling to survive. He thought about his 3 restaurants, his investments, his empty mansion. Success had given him everything except what mattered most: family. The guilt and regret nearly overwhelmed him as he finally gathered the courage to knock on my hotel room door. I opened the door cautiously, surprised to see him so early and even more surprised by his expression, a mix of sadness, hope, and determination. "We need to talk," he said, his voice unsteady. In the small hotel room, he laid out documents, photos, letters, evidence of a connection I never knew existed. My mother had kept so many secrets. According to Robert, they'd been in love decades ago, but she'd left suddenly without explanation. He showed me a photo of them together, young and happy. I recognized my mother's smile immediately, the same smile she'd given me during her final days. "She never told me about you," I whispered, tears forming. "She never told me about you either," he replied, his own eyes glistening. The revelation hung between us like a physical presence. This stranger, this wealthy man who'd found me at my lowest moment, was claiming to be my father. I wanted to laugh, to accuse him of some elaborate scam, but the evidence was compelling. Plus, what would he gain from lying? He already had everything. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. He didn't flinch at my tone. Instead, he pulled out one final item from his pocket, a music box I recognized instantly. It had been my mother's most treasured possession, one she'd never explain when I asked about its origin. "I gave this to her on our last night together," he explained. "Inside is an inscription only she would know." With trembling hands, I opened the secret compartment he showed me, reading words that confirmed everything. My world tilted on its axis, past and future rearranging themselves around this impossible truth. Robert suggested a DNA test, not because he doubted but because he wanted to give me assurance. "You don't have to take my word for it," he said, understanding my skepticism. I agreed, partly because I needed scientific proof to accept something so life-changing, and partly because I was still wary this might be some elaborate scheme. We went to a private clinic that same day, the sterile environment a stark contrast to our emotionally charged situation. The technician explained it would take a few days for results, but Robert used his influence to expedite the process. As we left, he hesitantly asked if I'd stay at his guest house while we waited. "No pressure," he added quickly, "but it's better than a hotel." I agreed with reluctance, keeping my guard up despite his kindness. The guest house turned out to be larger than any apartment I'd ever lived in. That first night, surrounded by luxury after months of hardship, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, wondering why she'd kept Robert a secret. Had she been protecting me or herself? The few times I'd asked about my father, she'd changed the subject or given vague answers about a man who wasn't ready for family life. Now I questioned everything I thought I knew. In the morning, Robert gave me space but invited me for breakfast at his main house. Over coffee, he showed me photo albums of his life. His humble beginnings, opening his first small restaurant, the gradual expansion of his business. He wasn't just giving me his biography, he was offering pieces of a heritage I never knew was mine. 2 days later, the email arrived with our DNA results. We sat together in his home office, both nervous to open it. "Whatever it says," Robert spoke softly, "I want you to know that meeting you has already changed me. If you're not my daughter, I'd still like to help you get back on your feet." His sincerity was disarming. I nodded, too emotional to speak, and clicked the attachment. The screen loaded, displaying our results in clinical, undeniable terms. 99.9998% probability of paternity. The world seemed to stop for a moment before rushing back in with new clarity. Robert's shoulders shook with silent sobs, decades of unknown loss finally finding release. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, feeling like I'd both found and lost something simultaneously, found a father, but lost the narrative of my life as I'd understood it. "She must have had her reasons," Robert finally said, wiping his eyes. I thought about my mother's final weeks, how peaceful she'd seemed despite her suffering, how she'd made me promise to follow any new paths that open up. Had she somehow known this moment would come? Maybe she'd recognized that her time was ending and mine was just beginning. Robert hesitantly reached across the desk, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my hand in his. It felt strange yet somehow familiar, like remembering something I'd never actually experienced. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He squeezed my hand gently. "Whatever you want," he replied. "I've missed 19 years of your life. I'd like the chance to be part of what comes next, but this is your decision. The sincerity in his eyes told me more than any DNA test could. This man truly wanted to be my father. What neither of us realized was that someone else was about to challenge our newly discovered connection. News travels fast, especially when it involves a wealthy businessman suddenly discovering a long-lost daughter. Robert's announcement to his family received mixed reactions that ranged from cautious support to outright suspicion. His sister, Margaret, was the first to voice concerns when we met at a tense family dinner just days after the DNA results. "It's awfully convenient," she remarked with a sharp smile, "that you appeared right when Roberts expanded his business." Her words stung, but I understood her skepticism. From her perspective, I was a stranger who'd emerged from nowhere, potentially threatening her brother's fortune. Robert immediately defended me, but I placed a hand on his arm. "It's okay," I told him. "I'd be suspicious too." Meeting Margaret's gaze directly, I added, "I didn't know who he was when he found me. I didn't even know I had a father to find." Robert's business partner and cousin James took a different approach. Instead of confronting me directly, he hired a private investigator to dig into my past. I discovered this accidentally when the investigator contacted my former employer at the bookstore. Rather than being angry, I asked Robert to arrange a meeting with James. "I have nothing to hide," I explained. "Let's address his concerns directly." When we met at Robert's office, James seemed taken aback by my willingness to confront the situation. I offered him my previous landlord's contact information, my mother's medical records, even my high school transcripts. "I'm not here for money," I told him firmly. "I spent 19 years without a father. Finding out I had one all along is overwhelming enough without adding financial motives to it." What surprised me most was Robert's son from his brief marriage, Jason, just a few years older than me. He'd been away on business when everything unfolded and returned to find he suddenly had a half-sister. Our first meeting was awkward, both of us sizing each other up across Robert's living room. "So," he finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "I always wanted a sibling when I was a kid. Just didn't expect to get one at 25. His attempt at humor cracked the tension. We talked for hours that day, discovering shared interests in books and music. By evening, he was showing me embarrassing photos of Robert from company parties and telling me stories about growing up with our father. "He's a good man," Jason said when Robert left the room to take a call. "He's always had this sadness though, like something was missing. Now I get why." Not everyone was as accepting as Jason. Robert's mother, my grandmother, remained distant at family gatherings, watching me with wary eyes. I understood her protective instinct toward her son but still felt the sting of her rejection. One afternoon, while helping Robert organize old family photos, I found one of his mother in her youth. "She was beautiful," I commented. Robert smiled sadly. "Still is, underneath all that suspicion. Give her time." Time, however, seemed to be working against us. Margaret had begun suggesting to anyone who would listen that I should take another DNA test, implying the first might have been manipulated. The family tension was building, threatening the fragile relationship I was developing with Robert. What we didn't realize was that the ultimate proof of our connection would come from an unexpected source, one that even the most skeptical family member couldn't deny. The music box my mother had treasured became the center of our story's next chapter. One evening, while Robert and I were sharing dinner at his home, I mentioned how she would wind it up every night before bed, listening to its melody with a faraway look in her eyes. "It plays Pachelbel's Canon," I said. "She once told me it was playing when she had her first dance with someone special." Robert set down his fork, visibly moved. "Our first dance," he confirmed, "was at a charity gala. That song started playing, and I asked her to dance even though we'd just met." The shared memory created a bridge between us, connecting my childhood to his past in a way that felt almost magical. Neither of us realized then that the music box held more than just music and memories. The discovery happened accidentally. I'd brought the music box to Robert's house, wanting to show him how well my mother had preserved his gift. As we examined it together, his fingers pressed a section of the ornate wood carving that seemed to give way slightly. "There's something here," he murmured, pressing more deliberately. With a soft click, a hidden compartment opened, one neither of us had known existed. Inside lay a yellowed envelope addressed to my daughter. My hands trembled as I opened it, unfolding a letter written in my mother's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest girl," it began. "If you're reading this, you've found your father, and I am gone. There are truths you both deserve to know." Robert and I exchanged glances, both hesitant yet desperate to continue. The letter revealed everything. My mother had discovered she was pregnant shortly after Robert had proposed. Overjoyed, she'd planned to tell him immediately, until she received her medical diagnosis the very same day. A congenital heart condition, serious enough that doctors warned pregnancy might kill her. She faced an impossible choice: risk her life to have me, or terminate the pregnancy to save herself. She chose me, but couldn't bear to tell Robert, knowing he would insist on marriage and sharing her burden. "I couldn't let him watch me die," she wrote. "I couldn't let him blame our child for my choice." So she disappeared, leaving both the man she loved and her hometown behind. The letter continued, explaining how she'd survived against the odds but remained fragile, always knowing her time was limited. "I've watched you grow into a remarkable young woman," the letter concluded, "and my only regret is separating you from your father. Robert Caldwell is a good man who deserved to know you. I've kept track of him from afar, his success, his brief marriage, his son who is your half-brother. Now that I'm gone, find him if you can. Tell him I never stopped loving him. Tell him I'm sorry." Enclosed with the letter was a faded photograph I'd never seen before. My mother, visibly pregnant, standing beside a much younger Robert. On the back was written, "The family that almost was, 1999. Robert's tears fell freely as he traced my mother's image with his finger. "I would have waited," he whispered. "I would have been there for both of you." The revelation hit me with both healing and hurt, understanding my mother's sacrifice while mourning what could have been. The letter proved what the DNA test had already told us, but in a way that spoke to our hearts rather than science. When Robert suggested we show it to his skeptical family members, I agreed. Margaret, James, even Robert's reserved mother, none could maintain their suspicions in the face of my mother's words. The hidden letter became a bridge not just between Robert and me, but between me and his entire family. My grandmother was the most transformed, pulling me into an unexpected embrace after reading the letter. "She loved him enough to leave," she said softly, "and she loved you enough to stay alive. You're a Caldwell, through and through." The music box that had played its melody throughout my childhood had been keeping its most important secret all along, the true reason for my mother's choices and the family waiting for me on the other side of her sacrifice. Accepting that we were father and daughter was one thing. Learning how to actually be family was something else entirely. We were strangers trying to bridge a 19-year gap, each of us carrying patterns and habits formed in separate lives. Robert wanted to give me everything at once: a new wardrobe, a car, immediate access to family accounts. His generosity came from love but sometimes felt overwhelming. "I'm not used to this," I admitted one day after he surprised me with a credit card linked to his account. "Mom and I always lived simply. Sometimes we struggled, but we managed." He nodded, trying to understand. "I just want to make up for lost time," he explained. We both needed to learn that time, not money, was what our relationship truly needed. The first real breakthrough came when Robert asked about my college dreams. Before my mother's illness, I'd planned to study literature and creative writing. She always encouraged my writing, I told him. Even in the hospital, she'd ask me to read my stories to her. Rather than immediately offering to pay for an expensive university, Robert suggested something unexpected. "Let's write together," he proposed. It turned out he'd been keeping journals for decades, a habit he'd never shared with anyone. Every Sunday morning, we began meeting in his study, writing separately but together. Sometimes we'd share what we'd written, other times, we kept our words private. The quiet companionship of these mornings taught us more about each other than any extravagant gesture could have. Jason became an unexpected ally in helping us navigate our new reality. "Dad's love language is definitely giving gifts," he explained one afternoon as we walked through the park. He tried the same thing with me after my parents' divorce, buying everything he thought I needed. It took years for him to understand that consistency matters more than grand gestures. With Jason's guidance, I learned how to accept Robert's generosity while gently steering our relationship toward experiences rather than things. We started cooking dinner together twice a week, Robert teaching me his grandmother's Italian recipes. I introduced him to my favorite books, leaving copies with notes in the margins for him to find. These small exchanges gradually built the foundation we needed. Family tensions eased as months passed, but new challenges emerged. Robert's company required frequent travel, and I struggled with his absences, irrationally fearing each goodbye might be permanent. Meanwhile, I was adjusting to a lifestyle so different from anything I'd known: house staff who called me Miss Caldwell, social events with people who evaluated me with curious eyes, the sudden privilege that felt both fortunate and uncomfortable. One night, after a particularly awkward charity gala where I'd felt completely out of place, I broke down. "I don't know if I belong in your world," I confessed to Robert when we returned home. Instead of immediate reassurance, he considered my words thoughtfully. "Maybe it's not about you fitting into my world," he finally said. "Maybe it's about us creating a new one together." That perspective shift marked a turning point for both of us. We stopped trying to erase the past 19 years and started building something new that honored both our separate histories and our shared future. 6 months after our reunion, Robert called a family meeting. In his home office, with Jason, his lawyers, and me present, he announced his decision to establish a trust fund in my name. "This isn't about buying your affection," he clarified, meeting my eyes. "This is about security and opportunity, what I would have provided all along if I'd known." The amount was staggering, more money than I could comprehend. When I expressed hesitation, Jason squeezed my hand supportively. "I received mine at 21, he explained. "Dad believes in financial independence alongside family support." The lawyers explained the structure. I would have limited access now, with full control at 25. Robert had included one specific provision: a portion allocated exclusively for education, available immediately. His message was clear: he valued knowledge as much as financial security. That trust fund provision became the catalyst for a conversation I'd been postponing. "I want to go to college," I told Robert one evening, "but I don't want to move away, not when we're just finding each other." He listened thoughtfully as I explained my interest in New York University's creative writing program, close enough to maintain our Sunday writing sessions while pursuing my education. "Actually," he replied with a hint of nervousness, "I've been thinking about something too." He revealed that he'd been considering opening a 4th restaurant, one with a literary theme, featuring reading nooks and author events. "Maybe you could help develop the concept while you study? Apply what you're learning in real time." The suggestion bridged our worlds perfectly, offering a professional connection alongside our personal one. My first week of college coincided with the preliminary planning for Chapters, the name we'd chosen for the literary-themed restaurant. Between classes, I researched literary-inspired menus and decor concepts. Robert attended my first parent orientation day, sitting somewhat awkwardly among parents mostly younger than himself. "I never thought I'd get to do this," he admitted as we toured the campus together. That evening, he surprised me with my mother's college notebook. She'd studied English briefly before dropping out due to financial constraints. Some of her margin notes were about books I'd come to love independently, creating another unexpected connection across time. "You're living her dream too," Robert observed as I turned the yellowed pages. "And creating your own." The dual experience of college and business involvement accelerated my personal growth. Professor Martinez, my creative writing instructor, became a mentor who pushed me to transform my life experiences into compelling narratives. "You have an unusual perspective," she noted after reading my work. "The contrast between struggle and sudden privilege gives your writing depth." Meanwhile, Robert was teaching me the practical aspects of business: reviewing contracts, understanding profit margins, managing teams. One memorable afternoon, we sat together in the half-constructed space that would become Chapters, surrounded by paint samples and furniture catalogs. "I always planned to leave everything to Jason someday," Robert said casually. Now I realize the legacy isn't just about passing on wealth. It's about sharing knowledge, values, experiences. He looked around at the emerging restaurant. This place will be part of your story long after I'm gone. The comment made me emotional, not because of inheritance implications, but because he was thinking about our connection extending into a future beyond himself. As construction continued on Chapters, neither of us anticipated how the restaurant's opening night would bring our journey full circle in an unexpected way. The grand opening of Chapters was scheduled exactly 1 year after Robert had found me behind Luigi's restaurant. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. I'd thrown myself into every aspect of the planning, from the literary quotes stenciled on walls to the menu items named after famous authors. Robert gave me increasing responsibility, listening to my ideas with genuine interest. The invitations went out to literary figures, local celebrities, and of course, family. Even Margaret had warmed considerably, especially after I'd helped her son with his college application essays. As opening night approached, nervous excitement filled the Caldwell household. This wasn't just a new business venture. It was the public debut of our father-daughter partnership and my first step into the family business. The restaurant looked magical on opening night, soft lighting illuminating bookshelves that lined the walls, tables arranged to create both communal and private spaces. I wore a deep blue dress that Robert had helped me select, a small necklace that had belonged to my mother resting against my collarbone. As guests arrived, I stood beside Robert, greeting people who clearly wondered about this young woman they'd never seen before. Robert introduced me proudly each time, my daughter, the creative mind behind Chapters. Each time he said those words, my daughter, I felt both the strangeness and rightness of them. Jason stayed close, occasionally whispering encouragement when he noticed my nervousness. "You're doing great," he assured me. "They love the place. They love you." The evening progressed smoothly until an unexpected moment during Robert's welcome speech. He thanked his team, his family, and then paused, emotion briefly overwhelming him. "1 year ago," he continued after collecting himself, "I found something I didn't know I was missing." He looked directly at me. Sometimes life gives you second chances in the most unexpected ways. This restaurant celebrates stories, and tonight, I'm grateful for the twist in my own. Applause filled the room as he gestured for me to join him. Standing together at the front of the restaurant, I suddenly spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had sometimes shared her food with me during my homeless months. I'd lost track of her after meeting Robert. She was here, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, smiling with tears in her eyes. After the speeches, I made my way to Mrs. Chen, who embraced me tightly. "I was so worried when you disappeared," she said. "Then last week I saw your picture in the newspaper article about this place." She gestured around the restaurant. "From the alley to this. I always told you that smile of yours would open doors." Robert approached, curious about our emotional reunion. As I introduced them, explaining how Mrs. Chen had shown me kindness when I had nothing, understanding dawned on his face. Without hesitation, he invited her to join our family table, announcing that she would always have a place at any Caldwell restaurant. As we dined together, Mrs. Chen, Robert, Jason, even Margaret and her family, I realized we had created something remarkable, a family defined not by blood alone, but by choice, circumstance, forgiveness, and love. The girl who once ate from trash cans now sat at the head table of a premier restaurant opening, not because of wealth or luck, but because one man had noticed her smile and recognized something worth saving. As Mrs. Chen later whispered to me, "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become." In that moment, my past and present aligned perfectly, creating a foundation for whatever the future might hold. Life can change direction in a single moment, when a luxury car pulls into an alley, when a familiar smile triggers a forgotten memory, when a hidden letter reveals a sacrifice made from love. My journey from dumpster diving to family discovery taught me that rock bottom sometimes places you exactly where you need to be for your life to transform. The hardest part wasn't accepting my new circumstances but reconciling who I had been with who I was becoming. My mother chose to give me life at the cost of her own happiness. Robert chose to embrace me despite decades of unanswered questions. I chose to accept this new family without forgetting the lessons of my former struggles. What would you do if your life suddenly shifted from one extreme to another? How would you hold on to your true self when everything around you changes? These aren't just questions from my story, they're invitations for you to consider your own capacity for adaptation and growth. Perhaps there's someone in your life right now, waiting to be recognized, waiting for you to see past appearances to the connection that might change everything. If you found something valuable in my journey from trash cans to trust funds, from isolation to family, I hope you'll share this video with someone who needs to hear that life can turn around in unexpected ways. The next time you see someone struggling, remember that a single act of kindness, like Robert offering me a meal, might be the first chapter of an extraordinary story. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to hear more stories like mine, tales of unexpected connections, second chances, and the remarkable ways people find each other despite all odds. Your own life story is still being written, and the next chapter might contain the plot twist you never saw coming.